Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thanks for joining for our last webinar of 2022. Inshallah, everyone's well. Let's start with a little introduction as usual. Just go to share my screen. Okay. Yes. Okay. So thank you for joining in, those who are joining in. It feels like this evening because it's nighttime, but it's only 5 p.m. It's quite dark. But thank you. So today we've got a special guest. I'm really honored that he's taken his time to be with us today. He's doing fantastic work. We'll be discussing education in general and how education is kind of being probably ideologically driven, as some of you are aware, and just to be aware of what's being taught at schools, the new curriculum, and especially would be looking at Scotland and seeing the developments there. So as we do start normally with Quran, the verse I've chosen is Surah Al-Alaq. Now in reflection on this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about reading, reciting, Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq, recite in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clinging form. So someone who created us, recite, and again, Iqra. So there's an emphasis on reading, on writing, education, recite, and your Lord is the most noble. Allazi alama bil qalam, the one who taught by pen, taught man what he never knew. Alama al insanu ma lam ya'lam. And then the surah goes further, but no, indeed, man surely exceeds all limits. Inna ra'a astaghna, for he sees himself as self-sufficient. Inna ila rabbika raja'a, indeed, to your Lord is the ultimate return. So it's, even in terms of education, reading, having a God-centric view of our education, and obviously we're, people kind of always question about, are these taboo topics in terms of sex, sexuality? And we say, no, there's never been a topic which has been taboo. There's never been a topic where we can't have discussions on these things. But it's being aware of the ideology or what type of things are being taught about. I don't think anybody would disagree with saying, don't do this, or don't teach this, or don't talk about this topic. It's not so much that. It's about having God-centric view, a centric view. And what does that mean? That means something which talks about family, talks about the family unit, doesn't promote what we're seeing now is promiscuity, or very dangerous behavior, I would argue, and having that type of understanding. Some of you might be joining and not know who Strong Support is. So we're a peer support organization for Muslims who struggle with sexual or gender identity. We don't accept a stereotype identity, and that basically means we don't accept the concept of a sexual orientation. So we don't accept the concept of even heterosexuality being an identity in itself. We wish to see beyond the identity. And our membership includes people who want to live a life which is filled with God centricity, And that looks like God centricity looks different to different people. Now, we have support circles, we have one-to-one consultation, and we have webinars with great guests like we have today. So as well as we're looking for volunteers, we're always growing. So we're looking for a female lead at the moment for one of our support circles, and also people to help with video editing. So if you are interested, then please reach out. So now I want to talk a little bit about our guest. So if you're not aware of the Scottish Family Party, you can go on their website, scottishfamily.org. And what I really like about is that it's probably the only party which talks about the importance of families. You can see there it says families are the building blocks. So when we think about governments, or when we think about people, when we think about nations, when we look at that from a perspective, it is obviously a collection of people. What is that? It's a collection of families. And I think when we are discussing this, it's looking at the dangers which are now facing the family unit in all forms, and that's cross culture, cross faith. It's that family unit which is key, and I really like that. There's a voice for that here. Now, some of you may have known about three months ago, Richard kindly invited me to his, I think, Tuesday live show, if I'm right. And, one of the things that we'll mention, and I mentioned there as well, is it's the only Scottish Family Party is the only party I know which in their manifesto in defending freedom talk about protection of freedom in choosing which counselling people want to choose, so not banning a certain type of worldview or a certain type of freedom, but allowing people to decide what type of support or what type of counselling they want, rather than limiting forms of that from people. So I think, and hopefully we will, I will get more onto that in the coming slides. But what I want to discuss as well is Richard's book, which I have got as well. This is actually version 2. That's version 1, which is kind of showing up there. And it's really a good read. It is quite shocking, like at first. I'm very skeptic, right? So I'm usually an advocate for educating our children early about these issues, and I'm like, because there's so much out at the moment, which if we don't get to our children early, somebody else will, But what I do think is important to be aware of maybe the level that things have gotten to. And I think the key thing for me, which is coming out, is it's not that the topics are wrong to be discussed, it's the age appropriateness of what's being discussed in these topics. And it's topics which you wouldn't normally discuss at that stage, because children are just about discovering who they are, their identity, and so on. Now, if you go to the rshp.scot website and you go in FAQs, they have this video, and I looked at this video, and it's it really says no, it's stage and it is age appropriate, and it does seem like you go on there and it seems like, oh, actually, okay, fine, they have they're being reasonable and they've considered that. Now, I just went on the website myself and I looked at some things, and this is just what I found, and I know Richard looked at this more, so he can probably fill in a bit more than me. The This is preschool. This is ages 3+. So this is a slide. Literally, I've just taken from the you can go rshp.scot website. You can see this. Now, this is being suggested to be taught at preschool. Now, preschool is ages 3+. So this is preschool, and this is about introducing very complex family structures at that age. I was like, okay, fine, we accept that, we have that, we move on. This is what the curriculum says at P2, which is the first level. P2 is about ages 5 onwards, where you're just, you're starting school. And then you see you have concepts of orientation being taught at that age. And then 8+, you have concepts of transgender being taught at P5. Okay, so obviously we have that. We don't have problems in, you can argue, labels or what they're using. If we go further, this is at what you would say advanced stage, S4, which is 14+. That's right, I can't see it from here. And it discusses masturbation, and it discusses myths about that. Now, again, you can say, okay, so this does need to be discussed. Some people might not view it as perfectly normal or a healthy sexual activity. And again, what I said earlier about the ideology, where this is coming from, and just being aware of that. And again, having conversations with your children before that this is kind of taught, so kind of they know. But I'm presenting this just so people are aware of what is there. Now, the next one is quite a bit shocking, and I didn't kind of like expect this. So this is again at the same age, 14. And this is talking about attitudes towards anal sex being considered a taboo or something which is to be normalized or commonly discussed. And again, it's going back at the age appropriateness, perhaps, of these conversations, and saying, is that really something we can obviously talk about? I don't think that if the discussion comes up, but actively putting in a curriculum, and some of the images are quite graphic. I've not really shown those images here. So yeah, so I think it's an interesting topic. So I've literally just found that in maybe 20 minutes of research. So I encourage you to kind of look at that, look at the website, rshp.scot, here in Scotland. To be fair to them, they have put in contacts where you can contact and you can put it. They have put it for everybody to see. So I think that's at least good, that they're being good and transparent about what they're doing. But yeah, that's the material which is available for you to kind of see and contact. Now, the other topic hopefully we can get on to is Scotland has recently proposed through its devolved powers by the end of this year to introduce legislation to ban conversion practices. Now, what they did was they set up an expert advisory group, and kind of they just picked people from that expert advisory group. You can see the list of those people as well on the website. And one of the things that they actually kind of struggled with was to come up with a definition of what that word actually means, conversion practices. But they propose one here where they say it refers to any treatment, practice, or effort that aims to change, suppress, or eliminate a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Then they say a person cannot consent to practices being carried out against them. So obviously, if you were to look at this in the term of if there was an external force, which was perhaps coming in to suppress or eliminate your sexual orientation, then I think most people would agree that it's coercive and it's wrong. But if an individual believed or didn't believe in the sexual orientation or wanted to explore certain desires, as you would do in any type of therapy, in terms of what you're feeling, what your emotions are, what your behaviors are, and to explore that, you would wonder whether that would come under this practice. So, there's a little bit of a question mark in terms of what that definition actually means. Now, they say in this section that in the UK government, at least, there was an understanding of consent, but they say that this law should apply without any consent. And again, they also say, we also believe that the existence of a specific intent to cause harm, malice, or ill will is not required for an act to be considered a conversion practice and should therefore not be included as part of the definition. So again, that's a bit dubious to say, okay, if someone had a conversion practice, but the intent wasn't to cause harm, malice, or ill will, then why is it coming in legislation, right? So, and again, this, it feels ideologically driven here rather than what's good for the individual to make his own mind or decide which direction that individual wants to be going in. It's almost like the state coming in, controlling and saying, no, you can't do that. And then a lot of legislation that we've seen worldwide has included exceptions, but for some reason, the group decided not to include any exceptions in the definition of conversion practices. So, I mean, if they had a watertight definition of what, for example, if they said conversion practices is something that causes harm with a practitioner which has a predefined purpose of changing someone's orientation, identity against their will, it'd be like, oh, okay, so, someone's coming in, causing harm to somebody who doesn't want to be there, they're coercing that individual. There wouldn't be any issue with it. But because the definition isn't clear, it almost reads to me almost like you cannot physically change your sexual orientation, which for people who may not believe in that or may not believe that you're born with a sexual orientation, that is quite problematic. And I was quite surprised to see this. So they have a section in there specifically for faith and religious institutions. The group commends that the perpetrator of any of these acts is a faith leader and a member of a religious institution. The legal consequences may include the withdrawal of the perpetrator's professional license as a faith leader or removal of ability to work within Scotland or withdrawal from the institution's charity status where the institution is not otherwise regulated. Now, there isn't any other specific section for any other community, but we can see it's very much targeted at a faith community, and the faith community is quite singled out in that section. And finally, then they say something towards the end, which is again quite, I don't quite understand. So over here, they're saying that there's a need for culturally competent support and capacity building. So over here, they're saying accredited counselors and services may lack sensitivities or knowledge around LGBT helplines, people of color, particularly in large mainstream bodies. Very few culturally competent services could or do cater to marginalized LGBT plus people of faith. Now, of course, if we, people of faith, if they don't use that term, the state would still use the term LGBT. So, even if you use the word same-sex attracted, the state might still call us under the LGBT umbrella. And many LGBT plus spaces cannot or do not provide this support either. Now, so that's right. There's very few competent spaces where people of faith can go, where there isn't an agenda to kind of push you one way or the other. And the irony is that this law is actually hurting those areas or people or counselors who are working in that very tough area between people of faith and people who are maybe struggling with their sexual or gender identity. So it's, on one hand, it's saying there isn't much cultural support, and on the other hand, it's kind of punishing faith institutions. So it is quite confusing to say the least. Yes, so that is what I have at the moment. So I'd like to bring in our guest, Richard, to kind of see some of his views or things of my quick research on this.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It was great to chat on the Family Party live stream a few months ago. That was very interesting. It's a great work that you're doing. So
thank you.
I hope it continues to flourish. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here to share about this topic.
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed you did a video recently on the world's worst ban or kind of therapy, and it almost mirrors Victoria in Australia in what they're doing. What are some of your feelings about kind of, if we start with the ban, and it's meant to come in late this year. What are some of your thoughts around this?
Yeah, well, the Conservative conversion therapy ban in Scotland, they're saying they're going to make it the best in the world. Translation, they're going to make it the worst in the world, the most illiberal and restrictive and undermining of people's personal freedom. At the moment, the actual text of the bill hasn't been produced. It's at an earlier stage where I think probably they thought, we'll see what the UK comes up with. And if that's not good enough, we'll do our own. And inevitably, the Scottish government is thinking, well, the UK version's not good enough, as they call it. So the Scottish government is producing its own. You read some of the definition there. So anything to suppress or change. So anything that someone does that delivers a message to someone that you agree with them in their desire to steer away from homosexual relationships, for example, or anyone who wants to steer away from like gender confusion or transgenderism, anyone who wants to move away from that towards being sort of aligned with their biological sex. Anyone who helps someone on that journey is a conversion therapist, and therefore, according to the proposal at the moment, up to 6 months in prison for doing that. So it would cover situations such as, let's say you've got a 5-year-old boy who puts a dress on, and if dad were to say, no, boys don't wear dresses, that would be conversion therapy. That would be an attempt to suppress that boy's gender expression. So even that would be conversion therapy. That would be illegal. That would be a criminal offense. So what would happen is children will be taught about this at school, and they'll say, if anyone practices conversion therapy on you, you come and tell us about it. And then they'll contact social workers, contact the police. One of the things it says as well, you read some of the consequences for religious leaders. It says for parents, where a parent has been found to practice conversion therapy, which might be, for example, a mum saying to a son, in terms of same-sex attraction, we don't feel that's best for you. We think, we should don't rush into this. Let's have a step back. Let's see what's maybe behind this. Maybe we're good to go in a different direction. And if the son said, yeah, I think you're right, and the mum said, okay, we're right with you. We'll help you with this. We'll walk along this road with you. Then again, that would be conversion conversion therapy, and that the person will be liable to prosecution. But also it says in the case of parents, then their parental rights might be removed. In other words, the children could be removed from the parents. So the people who've written it are really quite vindictive. They really want to do the worst they can to people who they regard as practicing conversion therapy. One of the big parts of their discussion in the Scottish Parliament was they had, I think it was someone from Stonewall, and they said, conversion therapy is a form of torture, which is so ridiculous. Whenever I say that, I don't even try and argue with it, because it's so ridiculous and laughable. It doesn't need arguing with, because it's just utterly ridiculous. But in the Scottish Parliament, the members of the Scottish Parliament sat there in that committee, just nodding away, and they swallowed that whole. So the person, I think it was Stonewall, so they said it's a form of torture. You can't consent to torture. So therefore, you can't consent to conversion therapy. In other words, you can't go to someone and say, can you help me? Because I don't want to go down the road of homosexual relationships. And if the person says, yes, I'll help you with that, because I think you're doing the right thing, then that is akin to torture. So the logic is so pathetic. It is laughable. But in the Scottish Parliament, it's just totally unchallenged. And the conversion therapy ban in Scotland will cover lesbian and gay identities, relationships, attractions, whatever, but also transgenderism as well. And it applies at all ages. It includes parents, it includes religious leaders, it even just be a casual conversation. So it doesn't need to be in any sort of context that you'd normally describe as therapy. So if someone sat down to someone on the bus and just started talking about one of these issues, and the other person said, for example, oh, can I pray with you? Or I'll pray about that, you'll be helped to resolve this issue. Then even that, a casual conversation with someone could be classed as conversion therapy. What the laws say basically is the only approach that anyone is allowed to take to someone experiencing same-sex attraction or gender identity issues. The only approach anyone's allowed to take is to say, that's really fantastic. I'm really delighted to hear that. And I'm very proud of you. I think, I've just got no reservations at all. You just go in that direction. How can I help you to go in that direction? You're allowed to say that, but that's the only thing you're allowed to say. So, for example, if you look at guidance for teachers in schools in Scotland with regard to transgenderism, the guidance says if a pupil of any age goes to a teacher, and let's say a boy says, actually, I think I'm a girl, the teacher is told to say, well, that's great. That was really brave of you for sharing. What would you like me to do next? Who would you like me to tell? Would you like us to start calling you by different pronouns? Would you like us to start calling you a different name? If you want us to, we'll tell your parents. But if you don't want us to, we won't tell your parents. So you can have the situation where basically more or less everyone within a school knows that someone's changed gender. But the people who don't know are the parents. And this is happening. And we hear stories where parents have been in this situation. And it's quite appalling. Now, the targeting religious groups in particular, you're absolutely right in picking that up in the document. I think in particular, they've got Christians and Muslims in mind. In Scotland, the Scottish government, it prides itself on its good relationship with the Muslim community. But the Scottish government actually, it's not too strong to say, they actually hate traditional Muslim values. So they've sort of got this balancing act, whereas they manage to appear to be very friendly and on side with the Muslims, but actually, I say that they hate Muslim values. Now, the Scottish government runs an organisation called AMINA, Scottish Muslim Women's Association or something. So it's an organisation for Muslim women. Now, you might think, oh, that's nice. They're putting something special on for Muslim women. But what it's actually about is to change the values of Muslim women. And if you like, to rescue them from the more traditional values that they've been brought up with, and to turn them, to give them more sort of Western liberal progressive values. So that they're very much deliberately targeting traditional Christian, traditional Muslim, and other religious beliefs as well. I think the whole conversion therapy thing, what's behind it? Ultimately, these laws are unnecessary because all the things that would genuinely be objectionable, if someone was doing something without someone's consent, or there was some sort of malpractice, where there was some sort of physical treatment or whatever, I mean, all that sort of thing would be illegal in any case. It's already illegal. But the people behind it, I think what they really think is they hate the idea that anyone would express a view that implies that their personal decisions are not the right ones. And because they can't bear the thought that people exist who disagree with the choices they've made in their lives, I would argue, maybe because it pricks their conscience. They're not actually comfortable with their decisions. So when someone says they disagree, instead of just saying, okay, fair enough, you think one thing, I think the other, because they maybe know in their heart that actually what they're doing isn't right, then they become very angry. And it leads to this conclusion of wanting to shut up, basically, anyone who expresses another view. So I think the conversion therapy ban, it's not really about conversion therapy. It's just another way of silencing people who express an alternative view. I mean, the way we word it quite often is people should be free to seek counselling to pursue their own life, their own goals for their own life. So normally, whatever you want from life, whatever path you want to go down, whatever objective you want to reach, whatever issues you want to deal with, you can go to a counsellor, explain to them the direction you want to go in, and you can get counselling for that. And people might decide, I'd actually like to have a counsellor who's on my wavelength, who shares my values, who agrees with me about the direction I'm trying to go in. But with a conversion therapy ban, they're saying, no, you cannot do that. So if you're experiencing these issues, you can only go to a counsellor who thinks you're completely wrong. So say a person experiencing gender confusion, and they're thinking, no, I don't want to go down the road of changing gender. I want to just become happy as who I am. That's the road I want to go down. That person is not allowed to find a counsellor who agrees with them. But the person who thinks, oh yeah, I think maybe I'm the different gender, and yet I want to embrace that. I want to go the whole hog. I want to be transgender. That person can find someone who agrees with them for counselling. But the person who thinks, no, I don't want to go down that road, that person is not allowed to find someone who agrees with them. I mean, it's so blatantly unfair, restrictive, and a restriction on freedom, religious freedom, freedom of choice. But in the Scottish Parliament, not one MSP, not a single member of the Scottish Parliament is opposing the conversion therapy ban. Every party in the Scottish Parliament had it in their manifesto before the last election. So it's obviously going to happen. If the electorate votes entirely for parties that get elected who are supporting this, then it's going to happen. And there are going to be religious leaders who will face trial, and there will be parents who will face trial as well. There'll be parents who have their children taken away from them. And yeah, I think it is going to be appalling when it comes through. It will probably take at least another year, maybe 18 months for it to actually become law. But it is looking like being the worst conversion therapy ban in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you put it so well in terms of what I didn't consider was there's no age. There's absolutely no age limit. So if it's a 5-year-old, and when you're that age, you're not really sure who you are. You're just exploring your gender, and you can't tell 5-year-olds, that they might be wrong, or you can't challenge their gender identity at that age. And I think it's a slippery slope. And I think also what you mentioned about, I think the biggest issue, as you said, is there's no neutrality. So there isn't like you just said that, okay, if you want to go a different path, fine. Here's, and this isn't, a lot of people want to make it a war between faith institutions and LGBT institutions, but we would say, well, we don't need a war if the law was neutral. The thing which kind of really is shocking to me is counseling is not protected, it's not legally protected. So there's no law which dictates or legally protects a counselor. So the profession is unregulated in terms of law in both England and Scotland, yet there is a specific law which is coming in to do with counseling, and it's to do with LGBTQ. So it's almost like the whole profession is unregulated, but somehow this issue is so predominant that it's saying that no, you can't access support. And I think they changed that word from conversion therapy to conversion practices, because people who were, they were trying to pull the wool over their eyes and, would say, hang on, how can therapy be harmful? How can talking about issues be harmful if it's client centered? And I think in their definition, if they made it watertight, and if they said, oh, someone comes in and someone else is trying to change or suppress you, then there would be no issue. But what they're saying is you can't possibly change. And that is ideologically driven. There's so many stories of people who've come out, even in the LGBT community, which would say, oh, we were quote unquote heterosexual before, but we're gay now. Well, haven't those people changed their sexual orientation? So would that be conversion therapy if they've moved sexual orientations?
Yeah, absolutely right with that. It does assume that basically it's a one-way street. People can move towards homosexuality, but there's no reverse process. Same with transgenderism. People can move towards transgenderism, but there's no way back. That's a really important part of their underlying philosophy. And as you say, it is entirely wrong. But in the Scottish Parliament, when they take evidence, they choose to take evidence from just a string of activists who are all giving the same message. And the MSPs are sitting there thinking, a lot of them, I know they agree or they don't really know what's going on, but I think they realize this is a really sensitive topic. And if they were to say, no, I don't think this is necessary, they would be slated by their colleagues and the media. And I think they just think it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Just keep the head down and let it go through. But you're talking about counselling, but the proposals in Scotland, it would cover, say, any conversation. So even if a little boy asked his dad, is it okay for boys to wear dresses? Then if dad answers, well, no, not really, boys don't wear dresses, then that would be conversion practice. So that would be suppressing sexual expression, or gender expression, rather, suppressing gender expression. I mean, people have even suggested, if, let's say, a religious leader was talking to a heterosexual couple and said to them, you ought not have sex until you get married, then according to what they're looking at the moment, that would be classed as suppressing sexual expression, because it's encouraging people to not express their sexuality at a certain time in a certain way. So that would be classed as suppressing sexual expression. So even saying to someone, you shouldn't have sex until you're married, as it's currently being proposed, that would be conversion therapy.
It's amazing. You're absolutely right. It's conversation. So it's basically freedom of speech of people to say what they want and want to believe in. And it is extremely religiously or human rights violations, I would say, in terms of it. And it has stalled, I would say, in the UK Parliament because of that, because it is quite overreaching. But I also wanted to discuss in terms of, so this is what they're doing, kind of in this landscape. In terms of education now, there was a lot of teaching. We've had teaching on LGBT concepts for years and years, but actually gender identity has been something which has been, I would argue, quite new, maybe in the last 5 years or so on, that we're seeing. Even the NHS, in the UK has seen a rapid rise in clients coming with gender dysphoria. Now, I'm amazed to how quickly this ideology has found itself in schools and in the curriculum, because normally if there is a, even let's just say there's a different way of thinking, it requires some time for things to be understood, for them to make themselves in the curriculum. I know of being people of faith, being Muslims, it took us maybe decades for our education, our faith to be understood into the curriculum. It took us like years and years of speaking to the local authority as a community. And yet you find gender identity in RSHP being taught at age 8. This concept that, you can be whatever you want to be, which again goes back to age appropriateness of these issues. We're not saying, oh, you can't, we're not a totalitarian, mindset, oh, you can't talk about this, but it's about, you wouldn't, for example, there's so many things which are illegal for people to do under 16 or 18, right? There's so many things which the state says, oh, you can't do this, you can't drive, or you can't, there's so many of these things. Yet discussions on whether I want to change my body or, have a complete change of that is being done at a very, very early age, which, even NHS in their recent guidance after the CAST review have said that that type of language where you're promoting language which is non-binary is confusing children. And the NHS is saying that. It isn't like, just someone. NHS is saying using that type of language is causing confusion, because at that age you're only if I'm 5, 6, 8, I'm only grappling who I am, what does masculinity mean in that sense. So I am astonished to see how quickly these concepts are being put in the curriculum, and they are not age appropriate. We have no problem if they're age appropriate. And when, when a child has going through puberty, then they're understanding about what puberty is and so on. But telling children before puberty about extreme sexual practices or sexual identities, it does really amaze me to how they've kind of justified that.
Yeah. I think as you said at the beginning, a very good point. With sex education, as the Scottish Family Party, we don't object to sex education. I mean, having said that, I think where parents say, actually, leave it to us, we don't want the school to do this, I've got a lot of time for that point of view, and I quite understand some parents want to do that, and they should be free to do that. But generally speaking, I think schools, they're going to address these issues for the foreseeable future in any case. So the issue isn't so much that they're talking about these issues. The issue is that the message that they're delivering is wrong. The way they're delivering it is wrong. I mean, if you were to draw a grid of orthodox Muslim moral values on various aspects of sexuality and sexual relationships, there'd be various things where generally Muslims would say the teaching of the Muslim faith is these, I don't know, 8 things or whatever, they're not right. They're things to avoid. In the Scottish curriculum, it goes through them systematically, and the children are taught as a fact that actually these things are fine. So it really is that black and white. So the teaching, I mean, Christian Muslim teaching is very similar in these areas. So there'll be areas where the religious teaching is, no, this is wrong. This is something that you shouldn't do. And the Scottish government will teach children, the people who say this is wrong, they're wrong. Actually, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You go ahead if you want to. And the idea of age appropriateness, I think that's important, choosing the right age for things. But I think the message given is the more fundamental issue. There's some things that just shouldn't be taught at any age. Like in Scotland, they say, there's lessons that say, watching pornography is normal, natural, and healthy. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about it. I mean, that shouldn't be taught at any age, because it's just not true. I mean, it's wrong. I mean, if someone wanted to put that view forward, and with a contrasting view, and maybe older pupils discuss the two views, maybe that would be better. But the pupils are taught as fact that the basic teachings of Islam with regard to sexuality, human sexuality, are wrong. It's as simple as that. Now, you asked how the transgender ideology came into schools so quickly. I think the way it happens is that the schools were already basically accepting the LGB ideology, hook, line, and sinker. So LGBT activists were already hugely influential in schools and in the whole education system. And so they were, whatever has been looked at, there was always the thing, we need to check, we need to listen to the LGB groups. And so they had that huge power and influence. And then those groups started saying, right, we need to bring in the transgender message as well. And because they were regarded as so authoritative, that when they brought a new message to add on to it, I think the educational system, the people in it, just thought, okay, well, these are the people we listen to about other things, so we just listen to them about that, and we do what they say. So it's completely driven by activists who are, have got their own agendas. So they're basically given free rein to mold the education system to promote their own personal values to other people's children. I mean, that's what's happening. It's as simple as that. Another thing to mention as well, there are a lot of people who are very progressive and liberal. They often have the belief that suppressing sexuality, in other words, not having sex when you feel like it, basically, at any age, absolutely any age, they think this is damaging to children. So in order to allow children to grow up and develop in a healthy way and to flourish, their sexuality shouldn't be suppressed. They should have the opportunity to explore, and this is the sort of quotes they use, to explore their sexuality in safe and pleasurable ways at any age, at whatever stage they want to do that. As long as they consent to it, as long as it's what they really want to do, in other words, as long as they really feel like it, then that's fine. And that idea, some of the people involved in sex education in Scotland, they quite explicitly say that. I mean, they don't write it in their official materials, but if you look at other things they've written, that is what they believe. So that's another part of the ideology driving it. So part of the conversion therapy ban there, I mean, they believe that anyone at every age should be free to act on their sexual desires and basically to have sex. And they believe that anyone who says, no, you ought not to do that, then that person's harming them. They're damaging, they're inhibiting their development. So total polar opposite to what you or I would believe. But that mindset is certainly dominating education in Scotland. I mean, in Scotland, things are more uniform and things are generally worse than in England. We'll be 5 or 10 years ahead in the wrong direction generally. But I would say to people in England and Wales, well, I think Wales is pretty bad as well. But in England, if you look at what's going on in Scotland, then that's where you're heading. That's where you're heading. You might be a few years behind, but that's the direction of travel. So.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are kind of waking up to how I think a lot of parents didn't see the extremities of maybe what we were saying is some of these messages are just not, they're wrong even for adults to be promoting promiscuity and promoting across the ages. And you're absolutely right, if you're introducing sexual identities at a very young age, then obviously the children will ask about other topics relating to that. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to talk about sex in this context at age 5 and not talk about the other things. So it's, and we are seeing this, even in our culture where very young children are watching pornography, and it's amazing to kind of hear that pornography being kind of said, same as masturbation, saying, oh, there's something wrong with it. In fact, in that slide that we saw, it was like some religions, so it's almost like condescending language towards that people who have that type of view. And it is extremely ideologically driven. It isn't almost like, some people believe this and some people, but it's like, no, you just do it. And it's extremely liberal.
Yeah.
And what we had, at least in England, was the faith schools had a really hard time because it's coming from the government, and this government is saying, if you don't teach this to your children, then you're against the law, or you're not qualified. Do you think that there is scope in Scotland of schools which, maybe come from more traditionalist kind of thinking to have their own curriculum and reject the curriculum that this RSHP is promoting?
That's a good question. The Scottish government has a curriculum. It's called the Curriculum for Excellence, and it has guidance on various subjects as well. Now, if you look at the guidance in the curriculum, that's fairly benign. It's pretty vague, and you could produce a really good curriculum based on the documents that they've got. The rshp.scot resources, they're produced by local councils, the NHS, the government. So it's basically all the relevant bodies in Scotland got together to produce this set of sex education resources. Now, schools don't have to use them. I think most do, but they don't have to. A school that doesn't use them, though, they might use something else that's just as bad. But for example, Catholic schools in Scotland have got their own resources, which are much better. But they still have to follow what's called LGBT inclusive education, which means there has to be LGBT content in every subject at every level of the curriculum. So there's resources like, maths worksheets saying calculate the area of this pride flag, things like that. And that applies to all schools. So all schools have to follow that. So if they don't follow that, it's not the law, but if a school doesn't do it, then the inspectors are very likely to come and say, your school's very weak on equality issues, or, you need to develop in the area of inclusion. And people reading the report will think, oh, no, I'm not quite sure what that means. But the people in the school will know exactly what it means, that they've got to have this more and more and more LGBT content. Now, I said the guidelines for sex education from the Scottish government are, at the moment, they're quite old. They've been promising to produce some new ones for a few years now. But it seems to be whenever they say they're going to do it, it doesn't happen. And they still haven't done it. Now, I think very possibly that, particularly through the efforts of the Scottish Family Party, I'd have to say, we've made it into something of a hot topic, and we've made the government be a bit more cautious about it. So I think there will be new guidelines coming out before too long. So we're watching that closely. And the new guidelines will be far worse than the old ones, that's for sure. But it seems they are slightly nervous about it because they feel it could be a source of controversy for the government. So we'll see what they do. Now, in terms of transgenderism, again, the government's produced official guidance, which again is not the law. But if a school hasn't followed it, if it got to some sort of legal case, then if it went to court, the side who are saying we followed the government guidelines are going to be the side who are in the strong position. The side who are saying, no, we didn't follow it. We think the government guidelines are terrible, so we don't follow them. You feel pretty vulnerable doing that. So the government's transgender guidelines, as I explained earlier, it says, as soon as your pupil says, actually, I think I'm a girl or whatever, then the school just embraces that, affirms it, and then puts it into practice. Asks them how they'd like to put that gender change into practice within school, including even changing name without necessarily telling the parents. So, yeah, it's pretty bad. I think that transgender guidance, that should be a massive, massive controversy in Scotland, but
it's thought that people are quite, and I think, credit to Scottish Family Party, and like I said, credit to people who want to get the book Corrupting Young Minds. There's more into that in terms of the slides and how graphic some of the material is, which is being taught there. And at first, I was like, no, this can't be true. And then I looked at the website and I was like, no, it's, literally 20, 25 minutes of research, and I'm finding things which are highly controversial, and you wonder whether that this is done in the name of safeguarding or inclusion. I think, as you mentioned, that they are getting nervous. So I think that means that we forget that we have a voice, that the community does have a voice, and that parents who can take their children outside of that education and can speak to school governors. I know a lot of school governors in here who are, of people of faith, and they're very concerned about the material, and they have managed to review the curriculum to make sure that it is, frankly, doesn't discriminate faith minorities. There's one thing in showing another perspective. There's another thing where you're, kind of completely denigrating and discriminating traditional family values. So reminding that parents have that power. I mean, how do you think, if there might be some parents who are watching this, what would be some of the things you would recommend them to do in Scotland?
In Scotland, I would certainly say withdraw your children from all sex education and relationship education, unless you've got very particular knowledge of what goes on in the school where your children are. I would just say withdraw them from it, because even if the school said, oh yes, what we do, like you're saying, the school will always say, oh yes, what we do is very age appropriate, you've got nothing to worry about, trust us. I would say, sadly, don't trust them, because their idea of what's age appropriate or what's a positive message, it's more likely to be molded by the training course they went on last week than it is by the parent who's sitting in front of them raising these concerns. So I think withdrawing them is definitely the right thing to do. In terms of changing policy, I sometimes use the analogy that if a parent goes to the school and says, I want you to change the way you do sex education or LGBT education, it's a bit like going to your local McDonald's and saying that, I think you should become a Japanese vegetarian restaurant. I mean, there's no point speaking to the person at the till at the local McDonald's, because the decisions are not made there. The decisions are not made by the manager of that McDonald's. The decisions are not made by the area manager or the UK manager. I mean, they're made by, right at the top, at headquarters in America. And it's the same with what goes on in schools in Scotland. It's government policy that's the problem. And so ultimately, there might be wins to some extent. You can make some difference at the local level, but ultimately it's the government policy. The other thing we often say to people is, obviously, for other parents, their first priority is their own children. They want to protect their own children from corruption, and they want to instill positive values in them so they can go through a positive path through life as they see it. So that's the first priority. But I don't think it's okay to then say, phew, right, I protected my children from it. Everyone else's children, well, that's their problem. Whereas we say, we need to be bothered about everybody's children, because even for parents who are thinking, I don't really care, not bothered about it, not interested, we don't want their children damaging and corrupting by these messages. So that's another reason why we think it's got to be looked at as a political issue. And it's the direction that the government has set that's ultimately the problem.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a collective responsibility. And you're absolutely right. I've been looking at UN mandates of education, where they've quickly put in gender identity from the UN. And obviously the government has to follow, governments who are under the United Nations and have to follow. So this is an international level of effort, which we are seeing, and it's quite coordinated. And that's why you're absolutely right. It needs it's not at school level, it's at a higher level where this ideology is getting a lot of funding, a lot of kind of support, and as we're seeing, it's blatantly anti-faith, anti-religion, kind of anti-family values, and it's I know some parents who have resorted to homeschooling, which sort of gone and said that actually don't know what is kind of happening in schools, and so on. If you're a listener listening to this, what do you think? What would you recommend some of the things that we could be doing, or should we be speaking to our MP? Should we be doing other things?
Right. So I think we're a political party in Scotland. So our mission is not to change the minds of the existing politicians. There are lots of other groups that try to do that, campaigning organizations. So campaigning groups will tend to say, write to your MP, write to your MSP. Let's see if we can change what they think. Let's see if we can change what they wish. Now, it's fine for people to do that. But ultimately, if you think about someone's personal values in this sort of area, are they likely to change by receiving some letters from constituents? Like if someone's of a very liberal, progressive mindset, so they stood for election for a party with a very liberal, progressive mindset, and they've got elected on that basis, on that manifesto, are they likely to change their mind and suddenly start pulling in another direction because they get some letters? I think it's extremely unlikely. So as a political party in Scotland, our objective is to get people elected. So instead of trying to change the mind of the existing politicians, let's see if we can get enough votes together to put people in the parliament who we don't need to change their mind because they already agree, and they will be speaking what we'd like them to speak. Now, in the Scottish Parliament, the electoral system is different. So small parties have got more of a chance than they have in England. So that's what we're hoping to achieve. So if we got a couple of MSPs into the Scottish Parliament, I mean, 2 votes out of 129, that's not going to make much difference. We're not going to tip the balance for any votes. But we can be, a couple of voices saying something different, or the others are putting this issue on the agenda, raising awareness. And we would hope that would be the start of informing the public and also starting to shift public opinion a little bit. And then, you can build on it from there. So we want to use the Parliament as a platform to present the other side of the story, if you like, to present the rationale from a more conservative viewpoint in terms of relationships. So just come back to say, what can people do? So writing to MPs and MSPs, I think it's a valuable thing to do. Personally, certainly in Scotland, I would prefer people put more effort in trying to get people elected to represent them, rather than trying to change the views of people who are elected. But generally, campaigning to raise awareness of the issues is very valuable. The book that you refer to here, Corrupting Young Minds, I mean, a lot of people have bought multiple copies of this. We've got a leaflet as well, and they've given them to as many people as they can. People look at them and often they can't believe it. Their initial response is, no, you're making it up. That can't possibly be true. Unfortunately, some people then, they don't really want to spend the time to check it for themselves. All the references are in here. But a lot of people, they register, hang on, there's something going wrong here. And then they'll be mentioning it to someone else, So I think we're broadening awareness of the issue, I think, is very valuable. You said about people home educating. I'm hearing about people choosing to home educating time and time again in Scotland. There must be a huge increase in it. I think after the pandemic, I think for other reasons as well, but generally there's a huge increase in home education, and avoiding this sort of indoctrination, I think, is a significant driver of it. But then on that front, what the Scottish government is moving towards is basically starting to turn the screw on home education. So, we'll come and check up on what you're teaching. We'll come and speak to the children to make sure they've been taught the right things. And to check with them, they want to be home educated, because if they say they want to go to school instead, well, obviously they can overrule their parents. So I think we've just seen the beginning of them tightening the screw on home education, because the Scottish government believes there's one true truth, and the one true truth is like secular, liberal, progressive values, and everyone needs to agree with this. Anyone who's not agreeing with them is a danger to children. They're harming children. So they've just got to progressively ensure that all children are taught the one true truth, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're moving towards.
Absolutely. No, and also people to support your representative Scottish Family Party in Scotland to take this, at the level Richard is saying, that it's such an international level that we need to be looking at these things. And
so could you just chip in there at the international level? It's interesting. You mentioned the United Nations. Quite of this comes from the United Nations, comes from the World Health Organization. So that's an important element. I'm sure countries like Scotland, they will probably be doing the same thing regardless of the United Nations. But the United Nations, the World Health Organization, they are very much pulling in the wrong direction, let's put it that way. And I asked someone once, I said, how does that happen? Because surely around the world, there's more people with a more traditional mindset when it comes to family and sexuality. Surely that's the majority, is the more traditional viewpoint. And the person said, yes, it's true, but the secular, liberal, progressive movement is united around the world. It's one movement all around the world. It said the more traditional minded people are divided into different religious groups who don't really cooperate but suspicious of each other. And so they, even though they're the majority, they don't exert the influence and steer the ship, if you like, which I think was quite interesting. So I think at every level, that's the UN. I think the same applies at every level. It applies with the nations, councils, the local village school or whatever. I think that it's really important that we have cooperation to help the decision makers to realize that this is a substantial section of the population that they're defying. Basically, they're going in diametrically the opposite direction that they want. So yeah, and that cooperation is very important.
Absolutely. I think it's so, within the Muslim community, the importance for us to work together with the Christian community, with the Jewish community, other faith communities which have family values, to come together for the sake of our children, for the sake of, this very important, because like you say, fortunately, it's only going to get worse in terms of liberalism, in terms of, kind of what they're doing. And as you said, that it has already had action where the government is seeing, and the government's there to see the people. If the people come back and say, no, we're not having it, then they're not going to have it. And I think people kind of sometimes forget that they have the power to put the right people, elect the right people into power. And that it is, like you say in Scotland, it is still of a chance, definitely. I'm just aware there's some Q&A questions coming. Is there anything you wanted to cover before we go on to the Q&A section, Richard?
I'd be happy
any
to.
Last things you wanted to discuss?
I'd be happy to talk through as much of what's in the different levels, but or we could leave that and go to the Q&A. It's entirely up to you.
Absolutely, yeah. You can give an overview of what's first, second, or
I'll go through quite briefly just to give a brief flavour. Okay, so this is the Scottish Government sex education resources. Nursery level, age 3 to 5. They're taught what makes a baby, how do you make a baby, and the message is to make a baby, you need 3 ingredients. You need sperm, an egg, and a uterus. Nothing about mother and father. You need a sperm, an egg, and a uterus. And the message is it doesn't matter where they come from. You get the sperm from one place, someone with a uterus. You need an egg from someone else. It's like making a cake. Get those 3 things together, you can make a baby. With transgender messages, right from nursery, recommended books about transgenderism, basically. And as you referred to, talking about different family forms. Some families have 2 mums, 2 dads. And the message is always, it's not just that these families exist, it's that they're all equal. We celebrate the fact that there's all these different sort of families. It's really great that some families don't have a dad. But I would say it's unfortunate. You know, it's going to happen for various reasons, but you know, that's not ideal. Right into primary school, beginning of primary school, they learn about homosexual relationships. There's a video about two boys falling in love. And you can just imagine that your best friends, a couple of boys who are best friends, are going to be prompted to think, is that me and my best friend? Because he's the person I like most playing with. And maybe that's us, you know, maybe we're gay. Maybe we'll get married when we get older. And I've heard stories of very young boys, in particular, who start thinking like that. 5 to 8 year olds, they start learning about sexual reproduction. But it talks about sexual reproduction, and with equal billing, it talks about artificial methods like artificial insemination. Because again, sperm plus uterus plus egg equals baby. So if it just talks about heterosexual intercourse, that wouldn't be LGBT inclusive. So it has to talk about all these different ways of reproducing. And this is for age 5 to 8, age 5 to 8 year olds. I mean, some of the images are remarkably graphic, shockingly graphic. We reproduce some of them in a little leaflet. And when people open the leaflet, they often go, whoa. And yet these images are projected on a screen in front of primary school classes. Between 8 and 12 years old, the pupils are basically taught how to have sex. Pretty detailed descriptions of the activity and the pleasure of it. They're taught about heterosexual sex. That also showed images of, you know, 2 men and 2 women in bed having sex. It doesn't actually talk about what they do to have sex, but the question will inevitably arise in the mind of the pupils. Okay, I know what a man and woman do. So what happens with this? I mean, it's inevitable that's going to come. I heard about the masturbation messages as well. I mean, up into high school, the pornography message there, pornography, you know, normal, natural, and healthy. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about it. Masturbating to pornography, perfectly normal. You know, just make sure it doesn't get out of control. Just avoid the bad sorts of pornography. But in general, it's all fine. And they're basically taught that they've got a right to have illegal underage sex, a right to illegal underage sex. I know that sounds bizarre, but that is the message. I mean, more of the transgender content and just LGBT campaigning messages. You know, love is love, learning about the rainbow flag and what the different stripes mean. Things like same-sex marriage, that's presented as, you know, this was introduced, it wasn't that great. That was a real step of progress. Whereas a lot of people in Scotland and the UK think that wasn't progress. They think that was, they don't agree with that. It's got trivia like they're basically taught that lesbian sex is probably better than heterosexual sex. They're also taught as well that anal sex is probably more pleasurable than natural sexual intercourse. I mean, not with any serious evidence, but what sort of message is that to give to teenagers? It's effectively saying, give it a go. Give it a try if you feel like it. Abortion is just presented as, you know, if you get pregnant, you can have an abortion. No discussion of the morality of that. Up to age 15 plus, but there's a video about masturbation. I'll read you the quote, and it finishes by saying, put on some music, light those candles, and have yourself a good night. And it shows pictures of tissues there. And the message is basically, we've been telling you all about masturbation, so have a great time tonight. Put the music on, light some candles, and masturbate there. I mean, that's seen as suitable in schools as unbelievable. That bondage is made light of, threesomes. Again, this video just makes light of it. The idea is just, these are things people do. If you want to give it a try, then that's absolutely fine. I mean, the health hazards of some of these other forms of sexual activity are downplayed, to say the least. Now, the gentleman who was in charge of the project, producing the RSHP resources, is Dr. Colin Morrison. I looked up his PhD thesis, which is online, and he believes that we need to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. That was a major theme. He thinks, the Victorians produced this social construct, the idea that childhood should be something separate from sexuality. This is actually damaging to children. So we need to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. And the Scottish government took that man and said, right, you need to be in charge of sex education. So I wrote to them and said, right, do you realize what he believes? This is what he believes, his three quotations. What do you think? And they replied saying, oh, he was appointed by a committee, so it's okay. Not even beginning. Pupils with special needs. I got into a training session for those. I sort of slipped in surreptitiously. And the lady delivering the training for pupils, sex education with pupils with special needs, she was referring to resources where basically the teachers are looking at how to help the pupils masturbating, basically, and including providing them with devices to help. That was the direction it was going in. I mean, quite shocking. The LGBT inclusive education, that has to be in all schools, LGBT content in all subjects at every level. You know, find the area of the rainbow flag. Lessons where, for example, LGBT members of the Scottish Parliament are presented as role models. So current politicians have their posters up on the wall as LGBT role models. The school in Edinburgh that had a wear a skirt day. So they encourage the boys to go to school wearing a skirt. Just bizarre. Lots of drag performances in schools. When it comes to withdrawing children, I talked about that, didn't I? I didn't mention this. The procedure in Scotland, if the parents say, right, I don't want my daughter going to sex education lessons, the school can then go to the daughter and say, basically, would you like to overrule your parents? And if the daughter is 12 and above, the school would definitely do that. And if the daughter said, no, I think I'll go to them in any case, then she would go in any case. But even for younger children, if the pupil says, no, I want to go to the lessons in any case, then the pupil can overrule the parent, which is quite shocking. I've talked about the transgender guidance. Yes, that's an overview. If you want to get this book, just drop us an email at contact@scottishfamily.org. They're £5 each, but if you just email, we'll put one in the post, and you can see the grisly truth for yourself to see how bad it is. So yeah, there's a whistle-stop tour. What's in there?
Absolutely. No, I've read it and I was shocked, and I researched, and like I said, I showed you the research today, and it's absolutely crazy. So I think, we need, as faith communities, to come together to address this issue. I've got a question here. As a member of the Scottish Family Party, how have you personally spoken out against a conversion therapy ban and the same-sex education in school at the political level, and what response have you gotten?
Right, with the conversion therapy, that's quite an early stage. One of the main ways we communicate is through social media, through making video. So I've made videos addressing the issue. At the moment, we're trying to raise awareness. When the bill is produced, we'll maybe consider having a protest at the Parliament. We're also planning to make a video at the local prison. And the theme of the video will be you, local religious leader, or you parent, this is where you might be if you carry on doing what you think is best for your children or best for the people in your religious community. So we're really trying to make it clear to people what the consequence of that might be. But in Scotland, there have been quite a lot of protests related to sex education. Generally, the Scottish Family Party is always involved, but there's other groups and other activists as well who've been quite vocal on the issue. So we all work together, and that's been very positive. I would say with virtually zero media assistance, we've made it into a political issue. We've made it into a political issue, despite the fact that the mainstream media, all the newspapers, all the TV channels, like sex education is a taboo for them. It doesn't matter what the story is. They just don't want to publish it. But people on the ground are very interested in it. So we just speak as clearly, as loudly, and as often as we can to as many people as we can. And we just raise awareness. So, for example, during the next election campaign and previous election campaigns, in our leaflet that I mean, 2 years ago, we had a leaflet delivered to every house in Scotland. And one of the points on it was we oppose, I think it was, vulgar and corrupting sex education. So, I mean, that's only a sentence, but that gives people the opportunity to look us up online to learn a bit more about it. So we're always trying to communicate. We're always trying to present our point of view. I mean, it's an uphill struggle, I say, because the media will not touch it. Will not touch it. Yeah, I'll leave that one there. I could have said a few more things. That's probably enough for that question. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Next question is: are you hopeful that the conversion therapy ban and the influence of LGBT ideology on education can be reversed?
I think it can be, but it's a very long-term process. In terms of the conversion therapy ban, there's 129 MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. There are 5 parties. All 5 parties said that they were in favour of a conversion therapy ban, and every single MSP is saying they're in favour of a conversion therapy ban. So to turn the ship, I mean, that's a big ship with a lot of momentum, very definitely going in completely the wrong direction. So it's going to be a long process to do that. I think what might happen, I suppose my hope is, with the conversion therapy ban in Scotland, I mean, it's going to pass. There's no question about that. There's nothing anyone can do to stop the bill passing. Once it's passed, then we'll see when the stories start coming out. And I think that might be what starts waking people up to it. When people hear, oh, the imam at such and such a mosque, he's been arrested, or such a person's had their children taken away from them, maybe that will help. The danger is, of course, let's say that, the imam in Stirling has been arrested. Then the danger would be that other Muslims might think, oh, he must have got something a bit wrong. He should have been a bit more careful. He should have known not to do that. And so there's sort of, hang him out to dry a little bit. I think that's what we need to make sure doesn't happen. That when the first people get in trouble for this, then we all need to be right behind them, saying that this is just completely wrong. They've done nothing wrong, and the law is the problem. So hopefully, as we go further down that line, it will become more obvious to people that there's something to take seriously over the issue.
And I think you put there that you need brave people of faith to come forward and to say, and I think when people don't see a resistance, or they see, oh, it's the law of the land and you can't change it. And you are having that in other countries where people are now challenging, for example, in Canada, they're challenging the law because they're recognizing actually this is infringing on us, and then they've had to go back and they've had to change it. I think that's an important point that you've raised, that just because a bill has passed doesn't mean it's set in stone and you can never change it. You can still have, even after the law comes in, you can still highlight how damaging that bill is, and real life stories of what the adverse effects of that is, because obviously the way that they always paint it is, we're a victim, we're not getting it, and so on, and like you're saying, the other side of the coin doesn't get seen.
Yeah. I think with a lot of these things, I've got a friend of mine puts it this way. He says the facts of life are conservative, by which he means like traditional. So in other words, if people try and declare war on human nature, decide that they're going to interfere with the basic structure of the family, there are going to be negative consequences. And over time, those negative consequences will become apparent. It's like the sexual revolution. Looking at developments since then, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's been a disaster in lots of different ways. But a lot of people refuse to see it, but it's obvious it has. I think with the transgender things, I think the negative become apparent much more quickly. So I think that's sort of helped the pushback a little bit. But with all these things, the further down the road they go in the progressive direction, the more the negative consequences will become apparent. So while on the one hand, we don't want people's lives to be damaged, we don't want an unhealthy society. But on the other hand, as that happens, that makes our case stronger and makes people more open to thinking, yeah, well, we're going in the wrong direction here. Let's just see what we, do we need to turn back? Do we need to go back a few steps here? What have we lost in our society that's ended up with us in this situation?
Absolutely. I know recently Scottish Family Party also had a conference. They had good speakers and so on. If people are listening and they want to get more involved or they want to speak to you, how can they do that?
The main thing is to join the party. We've got quite a few members in England. Actually, you'd be surprised. We've got quite a lot of members of the Scottish Family Party in England. You can join via our website, but you can also sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. You can see the things we're doing. And I would suggest if you're outside Scotland, I would always watch it in the frame of mind, this is what's coming in England. I would say the situation in England is while you've got a Conservative government, things will probably still be headed in the wrong direction, but maybe a bit more slowly than they would with a Labour government in terms of the issues that we've been talking about. That's the general pattern. So it's not the Labour government goes one way, then a Conservative government pulls it back the other way. That's not what happens. Labour government will take it one way, then with the Conservative government, it keeps going the same way, but slower. So looking at Scotland is just a view into the future for you, the direction of travel. And I find that can be very helpful as well, just to focus the mind and to alert people to the dangers that are ahead. Yes, so during the party, following on social media to keep up with us. If you are in Scotland, I mean, do definitely join the party. We have local meetings as well. We have local activities. We have protests and demonstrations around the country. We do all sorts of things. We're very active. We're very active. And the other thing we do, obviously, is to campaign in elections. So we're always looking for people to be candidates in elections, people to deliver leaflets and to support our campaigns in various different ways. The Westminster election is the next one coming up. Our ambition is to have a candidate in every constituency in Scotland. We've got the people quite easily, but the money is a bit of a challenge. It's quite expensive putting up candidates for a Westminster election. But our ambition is to have a candidate in every constituency. And so we're just trying to grow and grow with a view to getting to the point where instead of being the biggest party that hasn't got MSPs, to maybe being the smallest party that has got MSPs. And once we have a couple of MSPs, we would hope that you then got media exposure. We would hope that then it would be quite easy to get, say, if you've got 2 MSPs, the next time you'd get 8 because everyone knows who you are. You've got a media presence. Once you've got 8 MSPs, then that's, you're starting to get a little bit of influence. You're really influencing the debate. I mean, beyond then, let's see, that's sort of beyond my immediate vision. But so our immediate step is we've just got to have people bringing these issues out into the open.
Thank you, and yes, I want to commend the work that Richard continues to do, and like I mentioned earlier, it's the only party which is looking at these issues and being brave. You require a lot of courage to go against the tide, and also as you heard him, message of faith communities or people who have traditional family values to come together to unite so we can safeguard our families, our children, the future, and it is very important, especially like we mentioned today, we've seen the transgender movement, how that's come about, and how these organizations are already in power and they can very quickly influence at a level. So I'd like to thank Richard for his time and Christmas period where things.
No, a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Yes, and no, definitely. We'll definitely keep in touch and follow the great work that they're doing, and bless that the party grows, it becomes more successful. And from all of the team at Strong Support, God bless.
Yeah, we're delighted to learn of the work of Strong Support as well. So we send our good wishes to you. Hope the organisation flourishes and can help lots more people. And yeah, we will certainly keep in touch. You must come back onto our live stream at some point, and we'll keep each other aware of what's going on. And I think what is happening in Scotland, I think around Britain, is there is a growing network of people involved with these issues. I think there are more and more connections being made, and I think there are the beginnings of signs of the tide turning, I would say, in terms of the direction of culture. More and more people are starting to think there's something going wrong here. We need to have a rethink, and that's just what we want. That's just what we want. So, pleasure to be on. Thanks for listening and watching, those of you out there, and hope to be back someday.
Yes, definitely be back. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thanks.